Welcome to Lectionary Call-In for Tuesday, February 2nd of 2021, where two laypersons, a pastor, and an academician gather for about 55 minutes each week to discuss the Gospel Lectionary for Sunday. And this Sunday is February 7th. Each Tuesday, we call in from wherever we may be at 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And for our friend Charles Willard in Minnesota, that's 5:30 a.m. Our little team is working to be faithful to Lectionary Year B. And we hope this discussion will provide areas of focus and reflection. Here's how it works. We develop perspectives independently after the leadoff person shares some question with us in advance. And then in this virtual discussion room, we share, encourage, and challenge each other. And here are the folks joining us in today's discussion.
Sarah Mickelson.
Bill Hall.
Charles Willard.
And I'm Don Upton. And speaking of the leadoff person, Sarah Mickelson has us in her hands today, and we look forward to her questions. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Good morning, everybody. I'm well, and it's cold, and I hope everyone stays safe. We are in the book of Mark, no surprise for what the year we are in, and we are in chapter 1 still, but we're looking at verses 29 through 39. It starts like this. As soon as they left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. He came over and took her hand and lifted her up, and the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered around the door. And he cured many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. And Simon and his companions hunted for him. And when they found him, they said, "Everyone is searching for you." And he answered, "Well, let us go on to the neighboring towns, so that I may proclaim the message there also. For that is what I came to do." And he went throughout Galilee, proclaiming the message in their synagogues and casting out demons. For that is what I came to do. I love that. So my questions this week centered on the sense of what have we been lifted up or restored to do. So question number 1, or Charles, do you want to throw anything in here before I just walk on through?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Okay. So Frederick Buechner has a quote that I lifted from, I believe, David Lose, that says, "The place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet." And I think that's where Jesus is at this point. So looking at verse 31, where he specifically lifts up the hand, I love that he came to her, he took her by the hand, and he lifted her up. And I said, so for what are we lifted up and restored to ourselves? The message Jesus brings seems to be moving us from something that's holding us back or preventing us from becoming. And he restores us into what? I said, last week we talked about possession and the man that was possessed with a demon being healed. And this week, it involves, I think possession and obsession involve a narrow and complete focus on something that's not of Christ, and it might be perceived by those around us as either healthy or destructive. If we, like the demon-possessed man last week, or Peter's mother-in-law this week, are healed and redeemed by Christ, for what does that healing prepare or restore us? So, Bill, I'm going to toss this one to you. We talked about beforehand that I was going to bring this one to you first. So what do you have for me?
First of all, thank you for the questions. All three of them, I think, get at what is woven throughout this rather brief passage. I think there's a lot here, and I appreciate how your questions get at that, though I really had to work hard. Donna and I both agreed when we first got your questions, we put them down and came back to them. First of all, you may know this. That quote from Frederick Buechner is very popular in the vocational guidance arena. I have been in secular vocational guidance centers, and they had that on a poster. That sense that vocation involves what is most me, what is most within me, why am I here, and it intersects with the world's need. It's a very powerful definition of our calling. A couple of thoughts. Many of Jesus' healings are done in public. This is done in a house. He goes from worship to ministry. And I think that pattern is important. There are churches I've been in, when you walk in, it says enter to worship. And as you walk out, you see a sign that says depart to serve. That sense that worship is preparing us to go out and serve. And Caroline Lewis particularly affirms that healing, I'm quoting her, is God's bringing us back to who we really are. And interestingly, various of the scholars wrestle with that thing you picked up on, that Jesus raised Simon's mother, and then she serves him. And both male and female scholars have said, in today's world, that can look like, well, that was just her role. Women are supposed to serve. But Caroline Lewis takes a different approach, that she loved to serve. And on the working preacher, one of the men told a story that I could resonate with. He said that his mother loved nothing better than to have the whole family together for Thanksgiving. When she physically wasn't able to do it, she still was in charge, and she ordered her daughters around to do it her way. So, and my mother was like that. In retirement, she would not allow us to bring anything. She loved doing that. So I appreciate that take. We do need to be sensitive and avoid the stereotyping. For example, I've done a lot more cooking in retirement than I ever did before, and I enjoy it. So we want to avoid the stereotype, but I like that emphasis that it's being restored to who you really want to be and who you feel called to be. And another woman scholar, Victoria Garvey, uses a phrase I love. She said, Jesus restores people not only to health, but also to hearth, health and home. Again, that idea of being restored to be able to engage with your community. And some scholars pick up on the raising up could be a reminder to us of the resurrection. Jesus was raised from the dead. It's being brought to life. And the kind of sermon that many of us, maybe all of us preachers have preached at Easter, that resurrection is not just in the sweet by and by, that people can be raised to newness of life in the here and now, people in recovery, people from mental illness or physical illness, that it can be in the here and now. And we remember at least several occasions where Jesus not only heals a person, he says, take up your bed and walk. In other words, something is different, move forward. And various scholars pick up on the point in Greek where it says that Simon's mother served them. It's diakoneo, from which we get our word deacon, meaning to serve. And it's used in other places. For example, earlier in this first chapter of Mark, when Jesus is in the wilderness and the angels come and serve him, it's that same verb. And in Matthew 25, when Jesus says, when you did not take care of me, The take care of is the same, that the diakoneo, which means to serve. And Jesus said he came not to be served, but to serve. And then one final comment, another woman scholar, Nanette Sawyer, describes what Jesus was doing as spiritual companioning, that sense of presence, that he didn't walk away. He came to, one could infer that he gets there and then discovers that there's a need and he responds to it. I like that term, spiritual companioning. That's what I have for now, Sarah. Thank you.
Ron, how about you?
Well, I want to affirm what Bill just said, is we did speak on another matter this week, but we started by saying we got your questions and we put them down. And it wasn't meant to say we didn't like the questions, but I had a little living to do. I wasn't ready. And so, for the listeners, those watching on Zoom recording, our little process is we get a notice out to each other about where we are on the cycle. We have a lead off who's going to pick the questions. And usually Friday night, Saturday morning, we have them. And we struggle with them each week. I think I speak for everybody, trying to figure out where it lands in our life. And for me, Sarah, I put it down and had to do a little living, which I think actually goes to the gospel of doing, which is the book of Mark. And just to build on the questions and the comments thus far, there's a lot of restoration going on in Mark. It's so fast, you can barely keep up with it. It's just flowing through. It's just everywhere. Healing and change, healing and restoration. It goes on. Just look at your margin headers in your Bible, if you have them. It's just going to the point in this gospel where Jesus is going through a crowd of people and there's change, and he goes, "Who touched me? What was that?" Somebody touched him. Someone is healed. It's a serial healing going on. And if you go into the small pieces, it's very domestic. It's in a house, local. It's, in this case, muscle memory, where you get up and you go back to what you already know. You're doing it. So your question is very helpful and challenging to me. Healing. How does healing restore us? Use the term restore, return us. And I think it's just a beautiful way to dive into this, because first of all, it's very personal. It's domestic. It's the daily life. I think it's the muscle memory of life. You get up, what do you do? It's not a stereotype. It's what you're doing. What are you used to doing? It's like, how do you run? How do you walk? How do you cook? How do you talk? You talk the same way you did before, but something has changed. And I think if you're leading a class or a discussion group this week, which is one of the things our team wants to help with, is you look at this Gospel of Mark, which is about doing, and it's so fast. And I think most scholars believe that Mark was a reporter. He got firsthand information from key people, and he's just reporting back the stories, which allows this nice, elegant ad. It's a mother-in-law. It's not meant to be stereotyped. It's meant to say, here we are, probably a little after the mid-first century. It's like a little nuances. This is in a house. And by the way, the journey isn't from house temple, isn't from house to synagogue. It's from synagogue to house. Movement is to home and heart. I like that too. So, the question might be, what next? What is the restoration? And if you even had a dry board, if you're in time of pandemic, write it down in front of everybody. The list is going to get long. Well, to work, restoring to introspective, restoring to prayer, restoring to travel, new travel, old travel, restoring to mobility, restoring to access. It kind of resonates with today. The Christian ethic is, how do we give each other access to justice, to a bus, to a train, to work, to education. So it's like that's the muscle memory you're supposed to have. We're holding the door open. We're making sure that someone who's can't use the stairs has full access that anybody else does. The business of life. I think this is, what is it to be restored to the business of life? What is it to be restored to another day? What is it to be restored to another meal? And I think if you add those up, it doesn't get small. it gets big, and then you look through Mark, and it's just like flowing like a tidal wave. Everybody getting back to what they know and what they recognize, getting back to the house. And I mean this in a very uplifting way, for me anyway, since your question, more of the same. Yeah? More of the same? I think so. More of what's to come in the next hour. It's this simple celebration of change. It's right there at the tip of your fingers. It's a celebration of basic change. And I'm just going to let that hang for right now because I'm looking forward to the next question. Thanks, Sarah.
Wow. Charles, do you want to say anything?
Just a couple of minor observations, and that is that what Jesus is doing at this point is still on the Sabbath. So that once again, one of the principles of the Jewish tradition that was at that time and still is that you don't touch anybody who is sick, because then you become unclean also. So Jesus not only touches her here, he took her by the hand and he lifted her up. Luke modified that a little bit. Luke has Jesus standing over her and rebuking the fever, and it left her. And Matthew, where he picks it up at a later time, he says Jesus saw his mother, Peter's mother-in-law, lying sick with a fever, and he touched her hand, and the fever left her. So it's clear, but in a minor way, and in a way that most of us readers today wouldn't catch. Jesus has I certainly wouldn't say a loose sense of responsibility to keep the laws, but he adjusts what needs to be done in a way that serves the person he's caring for, rather than, in this particular instance, he didn't say, for example, well, wait until the sun goes down, then I can take care of you. He does it right away.
Thank you. So one of the things that struck me is that in this particular story, Jesus restores Peter's mother-in-law to wellness, to health. On the Sabbath, he touches her. She would be considered unclean at this time. It could be contagion. I mean, some serious contagion. So in the time of COVID, this is really an interesting moment to think about. Not that we should shy away from touching each other, but that the idea being there were rules about this for safety and for protocol that would have sustained the health of a community. And Jesus steps over that to restore this woman to how she expresses love to everyone. So, it touched in my mind the idea of what your love language is, which is quite a hot topic for teenagers. And this thought of what is the way, how do you express your affection for someone? How do you express your deep, abiding care for someone else? And in Peter's mother-in-law's life, it seems like her expression was care and feeding, like I would believe anybody's grandmother who has a visit from anyone is going to say, would you like something to drink? Would you like something to eat? Can I bring that to the table? Because over a meal, some of the most marvelous things happen. Most sacred things happen over a meal. So there's that moment of expression that she knows, maybe as muscle memory, that she knows she's going to set the table and then something sacred will occur. And Jesus sets the table before even that starts by healing her. So it made me consider, maybe the question to ask is, if you've been restored, if you've been healed, how are you using that? How is that precious experience driving who you are and how you express the love of God to everybody else. There's a responsibility for that. There's an accountability for that. Almost as if if Jesus leaned in and went, "Don't waste the healing." There's that sense of, how are you going to love someone else now that you've been fully and wholly loved? So it given spark to my head, in my heart, about a certain expression of how we live our lives. If grace is something that is precious and unique and rare, it should be shared. And I thought about that. And I think, regardless of the stereotypes, Peter's mother-in-law does a beautiful job of that. And apparently she shares it with not only Andrew, her other son, but also James and John and Jesus, and probably a larger party. So a happy home provides a lot of care and feeding. That's my question, answer number 1. So this leads me to verse 35, and it made me think about the examples of balance between service and restoration, and how these are offered up in this story specifically. So how do we effectively share this message when we are chased by a culture all around us that tells us busy is better, and here we have Jesus going out before the sun even comes up to spend some time alone, praying. And it made me stop and think, when did I last take a moment of uninterrupted quiet to restore my soul? And how valuable that is for Jesus, and how important it is for those of us that run from the busy monster, trying to go, well, I'm going to try to get as much done today as I possibly can, because I don't get many days, like Saturday, where I have an opportunity to clean the house. And I don't slow down at all. Somebody shared with me, well, do you have an opportunity to restore yourself while you're cleaning? I said, no, because my monster is, what's the next thing I'm going to do? What's the next project I'm tackling? Where am I going next? After I clean the bathroom, am I washing the dogs, or what am I doing? So I wanted to invite us down a path of, what does it look like when you deliberately spend some time seeking restoration? And Charles, do you want to throw anything first?
Nope.
Okay, Don, what about you?
Thank you. Well, we were doing the first question, and I said Bill and I decided we would wait when we got your question and put it down. And I think, in Mark, to follow your point, waiting is doing too, reflecting. And it was good that I did, because I needed life to come to me. I needed a few days. And it was, for me, a surprise, the things that happened, that they would have happened anyway, but I was listening and waiting. Mark's the book of ING, and I let that happen. So I appreciate your question, and my decision was to waiting, and here's the results. The first thing is, I don't feel great today. I feel kind of poorly, and I think if I say that, folks that know me would say, well, I make a living. I have a job. I run a company. And so people might go, well, I'd like to feel poorly and have a job. But, well, I feel poorly today. Well, I'd like to feel poorly and have broadband and a laptop to connect with people and feel poorly. And I feel poorly today. I'd like to feel poorly and be able to click into the world, or sit here. It's cold day outside. I've got heat on. And the waiting allows for that kind of perspective. I'm blessed in what I have today, and I feel poorly. And I think this is just a call to the seeing and the waiting. I'm also thinking about, in Mark, I scanned it. Isn't it nice that you have a book that you can actually say, oh, before we talk, why don't you read the entire book? It's so quick. And it's just filled with healing and restoration. Half of them are cliffhangers. You're healed. Well, what does she do? What happened? This one's not the cliffhanger. The muscle memory kicks in. She starts doing what she does, where she has talents, what her job is. But half of them are cliffhangers. You actually don't know what happened. It's just healed. And it allows me to reflect on what might take place. But to your point about reflection, what happened to me this week was I was confronted with my own hypocrisy. And I was talking to someone that I depend on for guidance, and I bounced things off of this person, both professionally and personally. And the reason I'm not doing so well is because I wasn't thinking and I wasn't waiting. I was just doing all the time and got into a bad place. And I wasn't looking at the world as it really was. You know, this may be familiar to you. In pandemic, that's easy. I sit in this room all the time. I've been here for months and months. I think I speak for all of you in some sense. And, it's not that the walls cave in. It's just that we all have our own universes, and I'm not praying, and I'm not reflecting. And in the words of the person that was giving me such good counsel, what do you think the people that you're relating to, for me, it could be a client, for example, want from you? And I started answering the question, and I realized that it had no connection to the real world at all. I was just thinking about what I think the world wants of me, and actually not reaching out in a conversation or being transparent or candid about what was happening. Those are simple things, aren't they? But I just said, you all recognize that. But yeah, it takes work sometimes. It takes friendship, and I think it's that Christian love, which I think that deep abiding care. Am I quoting you right, Sarah? That deep abiding care, that love for each other, which allows us, when we're restored, be restored into something new. You know, something really, really new. And this is a book of change and incredible cliffhangers. That's my best answer, Sarah.
Oh, thank you, Don. Beautiful. Bill, you want to throw anything in?
Yes. The scripture says, in the morning while it was still very dark, Jesus got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. I happen to be an early riser, and I can't do this on Tuesday mornings because I'm on this, but as many mornings as I can, I am out before sunrise. We live in a retirement facility that faces on Tampa Bay, and to sit out there alone and begin to see the sunrise and to meditate or to play a reading of the psalm someone has recorded, a variety of things that I do. It's not that it's, well, I guess in some ways it is magical. I am still the same person. I got all the same challenges that I had, but I can resonate with the wanting to be out and alone before sunrise. I know for some people, sunrise is only a rumor. They've heard that they occur. And I videotaped some here and played them for some of my friends who are never up at dawn. So I'll move on, but I think there's a special quality to that. I read it because there's a poignancy to that, being alone and it's dark and gathering yourself. And, of course, we know this isn't the only deserted place in Jesus' life. John the Baptist was preaching in a desert place. Jesus was tempted in the desert. And to me, this illustrates that often after some high moment, he's been to the synagogue, he's gone to this home, he's healed her, that there is a need to step back, to retreat, and to regroup. And to try to get at the heart of your question about this busy is better, this story illustrates that it's not either or. I think that's the problem. You know, we just go, and Don has noted, the Gospel of Mark is noted for how often it says immediately. There's a movement, but there's also retreat and restoration for Jesus. Jesus didn't just restore other people. The Spirit restored him. So it helps us avoid the either or and embrace the both ands, that our lives are both communal and personal, public and private, engaged, resting is my pairing, outer, inner, caring for others, caring for self, and professional and family and self. I'm in a clergy support group that's been meeting for 11 years. We meet one day a month, led by a professional counselor, and we've been meeting on Zoom. Virtually never do we get through a session, and I'm respecting confidentiality, without at least one minister saying, I am really not, things are not in balance. We've got all these pressing needs of people, but I've got a spouse and a family. And there's no magic answer, but I'm just saying that you picked up on a very powerful dynamic, I think, in ministry or in life. Don illustrates from his work in the business world. And for me, it was a struggling learning point. I finally developed a mantra for myself to try to slow down and be more cognizant. And I had 3 questions that I asked when something came to me. Is this something I need to do? Can I delegate it? Can I defer it? And I was not good at delegating. So to step away and reflect and to get some professional management counseling helped me with that. And another was an associate pastor I had who, after a while, said to me, after he'd been on the staff, Bill, what people like about you is if a need arises, you tend to say, well, what can I, Bill, do? And he helped me slow down and say, does this need doing? And at this time, who is best equipped to do it? Meaning time, opportunity, skills. That sounds, I'm sure, very basic to most of you, but for me, it was a real learning experience to, in a sense, Sarah, retreat, even though I don't go out, if someone comes and presents a need, to step back and reflect before I act. The immediately that Mark likes to use was tended to be my style. And I often refer to Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits because that was particularly and is helpful to me. And basically he says he has these 4 quadrants you can work in, and he says the most effective leadership is dealing with things that are important, not urgent. Now, we don't always have that option, but what I take him to mean is what I'm talking about, that ability to weigh what needs to be done and who's best equipped to do it. And from an article that I read by Aaron Hunter, at one point the writer says, speaking of this very issue in this story, we are freed from the despotism and the thirst for clear measures of achievement. As with all freedom and deliverance, it requires a willing critique of usual patterns of decision-making, especially decisions about use of our resources. So it's still a growth point for me, Sarah, but this story encourages me to know that just as Christ needed to step away, I need to, even in retirement, because I stay very busy. I think the world is better off if I'm busy. But anyway, I appreciate the times of retreat, and I appreciate this biblical reaffirmation of that.
Thank you. I have been a person who struggles with the is better monster. And one of the things that's really helpful is when I step back and I have what I would call a forced resting period. And by that I mean either someone is taking me away from my regular pattern and putting me in a place where I can't follow my regular pattern, like a vacation or maybe attending a particular event. One of the things that seems to upset my balance a little bit, going someplace on vacation helps a lot because then I'm forced to be still. And so I wondered about the benefits of being still. And the benefits of not being busy are, and these are the things I always go, oh, I like more of that, please. More listening, more focusing, more sharing, more resting and following back in the idea of uncovering what's the best next step. And there's something about having the luxury of calling a timeout for yourself. And I see Jesus doing this not in a way to separate himself from the people he's serving or traveling with, but an effort to serve them better. And so my brain goes, what do I need now to do so that I can be a better servant? What's my best next step? Is it hustle bustle, put a dinner on the table? Is it regroup quietly while everybody else is out doing their thing? That's helpful too. Sometimes it's just putting on a crock pot and letting the dinner cook itself and using that time to consider the best way of feeding or providing the energy to continue serving. And I think that's important that Jesus acknowledges it's needed and that Jesus says, this is what I do. I get someplace quiet. I have a thoughtful conversation in prayer. I spend time looking at the things around me and inviting that to inform me on what I should do next or how I'm going to do the next thing. I think that's important, and I think it's somewhat essential to who we are as humans to say, when there's that much noise around you and that much energy being taken from you, you need to find a place that you can restore that, because it's not an unending source of life springing forth. So you need to be able to pull back a little bit and regroup. Even the tide goes in and out. I think there's some truth in that. So I thought that was a lovely reminder that even Jesus needed to get away and spend some time reflecting and enriching his focus. So that was helpful to me and is helpful to me. My third question is for looking at verses 37 through 39. This idea of, if I read a book and learn how to play tennis, does that make me a good tennis player? Likely not. A cookbook, does that make me a good cook? Unfortunately not. So while the cookbook can provide a good description of the process in words with the recipe and beautiful pictures of results, my life experiences have presented me with a different narrative. No matter what book I read, what cookbook I endeavor, it doesn't make me produce food that looks like that picture. It might taste like I think that picture looks, but I'm not good at the beauty of it. So Jesus' example of the good news does not languish in just words. He presents us with works of healing and restoration. And educational science supports this example of learning by doing, this kinesthetic action, which is practical, intertwined with the written knowledge of the intangible and the theoretical, leads us to a deeper understanding. How then are we called into faith and relationship by this example? Have you witnessed faith development in a way that was an intermingling of the practice of book learning as well as the art of learning by doing? And if so, how has this impacted your development of faith? I'll go first because in this particular example, I have multiple times where I've taken mission trips or I've gone on youth trips, and the art of getting away and having a task to follow and watching how, and I should say, Dawn, this is important because you mentioned this too, is it gives you the opportunity to see things differently. You see the art of doing through the eyes of faithful pursuit. So that uncovers mysteries that you hadn't seen before. So I find that this art of being committed to doing something in a service perspective helpful, because it shows me, or it shines a flashlight on those things that I'm doing, and I can see God's hand in it while I'm doing it. And that forces the combination, or I should say mixes in the faithful book knowledge with the art of doing at the same time. And I think that really does lead to a different and deeper sense of God's presence. And so for me, that's paramount. And so that follows my busy work with, while I'm doing my busy work, I'm looking for faithful ways that God is interjecting himself into what I'm doing and calling my attention to it and saying, hey, look right here. This is important. This stuff is sacred. What you do right here is sacred. And that makes it a mission-driven, vocational expression of faith. And for me, that's the goal of every day. Anybody want to jump in next?
I'll go. I was in seminary in the mid-1960s, and one of the benefits for me of that, I'm not crystal clear how it was before, but in my era, there was a great emphasis on what you're talking about, Sarah. For example, all of us had to take pastoral care counseling courses, and we worked I was in the Atlanta area. There were lots of places where we could go and serve as a chaplain. All of my work was at Grady Memorial Hospital, which was then and still is a large charity hospital. And I purposely chose that because on a Friday night in the emergency room, 2 examples of every crisis in the world came through those doors. It really was wild to be the chaplain on a weekend. And I grew up in a rather sheltered environment, and that I took various part-time courses. I spent my last summer before my senior year working full-time as a chaplain there. And back in those days, they spoke of the different wings as wards. There'd be an east, north, south. And wards were assigned randomly, and one of mine this was in 1965. Abortions were illegal. And that ward stayed full the whole summer with young ladies who had come to Atlanta for illegal abortions, and dire physical consequences occurred. I know this isn't pleasant. It may be disturbing to some. That summer, 2 young ladies, one 16 and one 18-year-old, had to have complete hysterectomies. It was devastating to the staff and to those people. One of the things that struck me quickly, first of all, serving on that ward challenged some prejudices and certainties that I brought with me. What most disturbed me was, almost without exception, these young ladies were members of a church somewhere in Georgia, and without exception, they had not gone to their pastor. The pastor was the last person on earth they wanted to talk to about it, and the church was the last place on earth they wanted to go because they knew they would be condemned and rejected. If you sense some energy, it stirred all kind of theological reflection and Bible study and prayer. So what I'm saying, Sarah, is yes, the science is right. It was great to read theology and study the Bible, but this was a rubber meet the road. It was a difficult summer. There were many, many tragedies that I dealt with. And since then, I've been on mission trips to Haiti and Guatemala. And after Hurricane Charlie, the church I served in Bradenton, we did many trips down south to help people in need. I went on some of them, and church members every year had a mission trip to the Navajo Nation in Arizona. And I've read that in my era, young people, once they were adults, when they were asked what most influenced you, often it was church camp. It was for me. Now it's mission trips. The last research I read was that mission trips are what most influence young people. And every year at Palmacia, when we hear those youth report on their mission trips, in one sense, you know what you're going to hear. They had not realized how wealthy they are, how privileged they are, and in some cases, at least, no real awareness of the great needs that are out there. So, amen to this. There is along with the retreat and self-care, there's a place for action and walking into the tough places, which Grady Memorial that summer was a tough place for me.
Thank you. You know, I'm struck with how do we make every day a mission experience. And so that has been my focus. Don, what about you?
And I understand where both of you are going, and I'm in agreement. I also just know we have a lot of listeners and viewers from all walks of life, all stages of life, all kinds of experiences, Christian, non-Christian, different faiths. And I just wanted to bring this into the room that we're in today, that we're talking about change and healing and things that generally lean towards happy. And I don't think that's what this is actually about. This may sound strange, but I'm not here. I don't feel called to celebrate the happy of waking up feeling good. When the world, if you look at Mark, is all swarming around Jesus, coming to the door. It's always the crowds, which I think is supposed to signal that whatever room you're in, and he's often in domestic places, he's in different cities, people are needing, and it was surrounded by folks who are suffering and have poverty and have no power at all. There's no justice. And so in the face of that, we're talking about these things. And I think this also is not about another room. It's about your room, your space, and what love means, friendship and love. What is it to walk alongside? And these books, these Gospels are filled with the alongside, so are the letters. And what does that do for the learning and doing part, Sarah, that you teed up here? And I think what's in the middle of that is the alongside, where some self-reflection. I need friends to help me reflect. That's how bad I am. I need them to go, hey, wake up. You're not taking care of yourself. How can you, and you're healthy. Come on. What is it to walk alongside? And I believe in learning by doing. That's actually, I think I want to say it's very hard unless you have someone alongside. It could be a teacher, it could be a coach, it could be a dear friend. And it's so powerful that in the gospel, and I'm jumping books and I apologize, but, here's a couple walking along a road. It's like a husband and a wife, and Christ catches up with them on the road. And it says he basically unravels the entire scripture with them while they're walking. And there's a cliffhanger. They go on about their lives having had the Christ unravel everything, walking beside them. I'm trying to get this to a simple message that it's right there, and it could be in time of pandemic. Just if you have the blessings of being able to see people on a computer, which many people don't, it's right there. So I just want to talk about the room you're in, and here we're going from synagogue to the house, and we're going from places of power to places of weakness. We're going from places of wealth and authority into places of poverty. I mean, the gospel, especially Mark, is doing that. They're transitioning into that room. And I think the room is just all around, just all around where Jesus even says, who touched me? It's just happening so much around. So the room's there with us, which allows, I think, and I'm bad at this. I just want to I am not speaking with authority. I'm speaking as a lost person that has seen enough of it, had enough healing, and just enough of healing and returning to understand that it's real. and that love there is real. So, it may be, maybe think back on in your life, where was the shock of being in the same room and something was different? How about something as simple as when you're an elementary school student and your parents invite your teacher to have dinner with you? That's a new room. That's a teacher sitting in a meeting. How about seeing a pastor or a priest at the public landfill dumping his garbage? How about a teacher healing on a Sabbath? These shocks are right there every day, and having, to your point, Sarah, the ability to meditate and stop and dwell on them. For me, I need Christian love to do that. I'm so thankful today, not for healing, but for the people that take my little head and say, we love you and we need you, and you're completely in your world, and whatever you think the world is probably not true if you just get your little head up. I think there's a simple message in that today. And I've got a second more. I just wanted to quote just a tiny part of a poem. Philip Larkin has a stunning poem. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just a piece. It's called Faith Healing. And and he has the image of women filing to where a faith healer stands. He opens it up saying, slowly the women file to where he stands upright on rimless glasses, silver hair, dark suit, white collar. Stewards tirelessly persuade them onwards to his voice and hands. Within those warm spring rain of loving care, each dwells some 20 seconds. Now, dear child, what's wrong? The deep American voice demands, and scarcely pausing goes into a prayer, directing God about his eye, that knee. Their hands are clasped abruptly and then exile, like losing thoughts, they go into silence. So he sets the stage of this faith healer and, directing God. And then there's a pause, and I commend the poem to you because I'm not doing it justice, but there's a notation at the end where there's a sense of standing aside and pausing after this, whatever this is taken place. Assume no healing that was expected. And it says, by now all's wrong. In everyone there sleeps a sense of life lived according to love. To some it means the difference they could make by loving others, but across most of it sweeps as all they might have done had they been loved. That nothing cures all they might have done had they been loved. And again, I'll repeat the notation earlier. In everyone there sleeps a sense of life, lived according to love. That's the counterpoint to what I believe is the falsehood, the hypocrisy of commercial faith healing, that in all the discovery is lives that hope. So that's my thoughts today.
Thank you, Don. I love that. Charles, do you want to add anything?
Yes. I've been thinking about where I live and the community here and the concerns that I have that are the problem is that this is an old geezer community, and because of COVID, there are significant distancing responsibilities and rules. And my observation is that basically means that it's almost impossible to have a conversation because you're sitting at tables, you're 6 feet apart, you're facing that way, so I'm looking this way, the person over there is looking that way, the person over there is looking that way, and they're 6 feet apart, so conversations don't happen. And I realize that that's just not right. And there has to be some way to get over and beyond that so the conversations like this can happen. And that's going to require some energy on the part of the owners and the managers in the building where I am. That will take some redirection. And right now I have my reputation among the management is not great. I've been a mean-spirited, in their view, resident who is objecting to everything, and But I see that I do have a good time in the dining room. I mean, while everybody else has been quiet and just sort of, I mean, it's amazing. You can have a dozen people in the dining room and nobody's talking. And I find myself disturbed by that. And so I sing songs loud, and I dance around, and people, sort of, they're accustomed to it now, so they're not surprised. They're sometimes curious as to what I'm saying, but it's just I'm going to see what I can do about it. I'll report later.
Thank you, Charles.
I know it's making a difference. Just your focus on this. You're speaking up. By the way, we love you, Charles. We're about.
I needed that.
I'm gonna wrap this up because we're right on time. And Palmacia Presbyterian Church is at 3501 West San Jose Street, and that's in Tampa, Florida. And for more information, you can go to palmacia.org. That's PALMACEIA.org. And we have an email account, which is Lectionary Call-In at palmacia.org. And you're always welcome, and we'll see you next time.